Horror mobile games are actually quite rare if you think about it. Sure, there are dozens out there, but fully original horror games that are made specifically for the mobile market were almost non-existent, as the majority are just ports of better and higher quality mascot horror games from PC or console. If you don't believe me, just Google mobile horror games and you'll probably get the same results. So, chances are, the really good horror games are buried underneath all the mindless cash grabs, or were never given a chance to shine due to the negative reputation of mobile games in general. But there was one game in particular that stood literally in the middle of being a cheap cash grab and a truly authentic horror game. It was free to play with a bunch of ads and pre-made assets, but it also had a great atmosphere, varied gameplay that gave it a ton of replayability, and a very interesting story that was continuously developed over the course of its lifespan. The game I'm talking about is Eyes. Eyes the horror game, or simply just Eyes, was in my opinion the peak of what mobile horror games had to offer. Created by Paulina Pobis in 2013, you play as an unnamed robber trying to steal from an abandoned mansion whose owner mysteriously disappeared. Eyes was obviously inspired by Slender the 8 Pages, as you have to collect 20 money bags scattered throughout the mansion before you can make your escape. Although if you really wanted to, you can also say it was basically Granny before Granny. Regardless, the game had enough merit to stand out on its own. For example, apart from the main mansion, there are also 2 other different maps to explore, each with a unique monster to face, which I'll go over later. But by far, the biggest strength of the game is its atmosphere. There's no overbearing music or sound effects to give off fake tension. The only sound you can hear is from the environment itself, from the wooden creaks of the doors to the gust of wind constantly howling in your ears. It gives you the sense that you're all alone. Except you're not. Lurking deep within the mansion is a monster without a body and craves the taste of human flesh, the Krasue. Now, an interesting fact about this creature is that it's actually based on a real-life legend in Southeast Asian folklore. There are many different interpretations of the Krasue, but in general it's regarded as a beautiful woman that was either reincarnated or cursed into becoming the monster. In the game, she guards the mansion's halls, and there's no way to fight back. You can only escape to a room with a closed door, and I emphasize closed because if a door isn't properly shut in time, she'll be able to enter and catch you. There are a few cues that can let you know when she's nearby. Objects will begin to shake and lights flicker around her presence. And the game does provide one more tool to help you survive, and it actually might have been the first horror game to invent this particular mechanic, which was the ability to switch to the monster's perspective, hence the name Eyes, as in order to access this ability you'll have to collect eye runes that are also scattered on the map. The ability only lasts 2.5 seconds and has a limited number of uses, so activating it at the best time is the key to survival. But other than being a cool mechanic, it also serves as the introduction into the lore behind the monster and the mansion itself, as every time you use it, the Krasue will speak to the player, or more specifically the character you play as, saying things like she needed him and he couldn't save her, or how much she loved him. Unfortunately, despite the game being out for years, the full story of Eyes hasn't been fully explained, and for several reasons. First and foremost, the game only ended after 3 chapters on a cliffhanger, and also it went through a lot of drastic changes over the years, both in-game and lore-wise. As in the beta, it showed that it was supposed to be a much shorter game, with it ending at the first chapter with the robber being implied to be killed at the end. That's also why when chapters were introduced and 2 new monsters were added, they didn't really fit with each other design-wise, as they were just from an asset store. I mean, for comparison, the first main one is based off of a real-life folklore, but afterwards it's just a cartoony looking skeleton, and the last one is just the average pit bull named Princess. So in short, the game started off as a simple horror game that just grew more over time and kept itself vague so that people would stay interested and keep buying to play each new chapter, but it ended before finishing the story, which is a trend that a lot of horror game devs tend to lean towards nowadays, with a few especially being very guilty of it. But I still think the game's creator left enough clues to piece together what the whole story of Eyes is, and I managed to gather all of these pieces to form what I think is a really interesting story of ghosts and haunting ties from the past. The story begins with an unnamed robber trying to make some money by breaking into an abandoned mansion belonging to the wealthy Miles family. Also, for the sake of simplicity, I'll be giving the unnamed protagonist the name of Mike so I don't have to keep saying the robber. Anyway, there are 4 family portraits that can be found inside the mansion, consisting of the owner who went missing, Mr. Miles, his youngest daughter Emily, and his unnamed wife and daughter. After Mike breaks into the mansion, he unknowingly curses himself after finding and touching the portrait of Mr. Miles, as taped to the back of the frame is a note stating that he traps some kind of spirit inside his picture, and that the curse will be passed on to whomever touches it. The curse being the Krasue, that seems to be some girl close to him that he wasn't able to save. As Mike continues to explore the mansion, he'll find more clues regarding the curse through various objects, like an abundance of tomes and incantation books, a room dedicated to rituals, and a secret room that seemed to belong to the Miles children. After collecting enough money bags and getting out alive, Mike sets off to try and lift the curse off of him, similar to how Mr. Miles did. In order to do this, he traveled to the hospital Mr. Miles was administered in based on his discharge papers. Upon arriving there, the hospital was also left to rot, with the place practically empty aside from the rats and the second monster, Charlie, a towering skeletal figure that has the ability to travel through paintings that are placed throughout the map. This time, Charlie appears to speak to Mike as his father, and based on the dialogue, the two weren't on the best terms, with Mike saying it was his fault for the deaths of someone close to him and his pet dog, while Charlie insists that he did it to protect him and that he should respect his decisions as his father. Whatever happened between them is unclear, but it's apparent that he had some connection to the Krasue and the next monster, which we'll see later. Eventually, Mike finds a journal belonging to Emily Miles, the youngest daughter. She writes how the curse has affected her family, especially her father, causing him to have insomnia and constant paranoia. Near the end of the journal, she writes how her father discovered a way to seal the curse in his portrait, and tasked her with hiding it deep in the family mansion and to never return so that the curse would stay locked away forever. With the final entry hinting at Mr. Miles ending his own life, possibly as part of the ritual to keep the curse locked away, or maybe as a way to keep the curse from affecting anyone else. Either way, it seems that Emily is probably still alive, so with a new lead, Mike heads over to Emily's old school for potential answers to her whereabouts, only to find it also abandoned. From there, that's when Mike meets the third monster, Good Boy, a ravenous beast that seems to take the form of Mike's old dog from his childhood. Apparently, Mike accidentally killed him during a heated argument with his father Charlie. The dog was able to speak and asked why he did it, which Mike deeply regretted as it was actually his fault. During Mike's exploration, he finds a teacher's book, and it turns out that same teacher had been researching the curse that plagued the Miles family. According to her, the curse is like a spirit that latches itself onto troubled people, with the Miles family being the main host. What it does is it manifests the victim's past sins into reality. So the ghosts that Mike has been encountering aren't technically real, but have turned into something physical and are based on his past personally. The chapter ends with Mike setting off to find Emily again, but that's where the game ends. But now that begs the question, what was the curse and where did it come from? And more importantly, who was the Miles family? Long before the events of the main game take place, the curse is traced back to the Miles family bloodline. This curse plagued the family for generations, only affecting the most troubled members by haunting them of things of their past. Now the origin of the curse is never explained, so this part will border on theory territory. Perhaps the curse came onto the family by a witch. As in the game, there is a fourth non-canonical monster, which is just the witch. She does have a name, which is Ursula, but she's considered non-canon due to not having any lore dialogues and being made specifically for a Halloween update. Witches in general were known to curse people that wronged them, so it's possible one of Mr. Miles' ancestors either scammed or drove a witch off of her land to gain their wealth, which resulted in the curse. And it would continue to plague them for generations up to the current Miles family we know now. It's also unknown when the curse took effect for Mr. Miles' family, but it was implied to have lasted for years, as the portrait of both parents are shown to be tired, along with there being an abundance of sleeping pills found inside the mansion. One day, Mr. Miles had a psychosis episode and was hospitalized and sent to a psychiatric ward for a while. Realizing he might not have that much time left, he finally took matters into his own hands and researched more about the curse through ancient books of the occult. He would later learn that the curse had some kind of connection to paintings, so he used this knowledge to create that magically sealed room from earlier, using their pictures sort of like protection totems, so that his kids would at least have some place to be safe. Eventually, Mr. Miles was able to find a way to seal the curse in his own portrait, and made his daughter Emily hide it away somewhere in the mansion so that no one could find it. And the remaining Miles family members were forbidden from returning to the mansion to ensure that the curse would stay closed away forever. Before it was called Eyes the Horror Game, it was originally called Eyes the Haunt, as in haunting ties, something that the curse embodies, and it latches itself onto its victims by manifesting things from their past into reality. For the protagonist, the Krasue represents his biggest failure, Charlie represents his biggest resentment, and Good Boy represents his biggest regret. By manifesting as the Krasue, the spirit is trying to lure Mike into being caught, giving him the illusion of a second chance to be with her again. Manifesting as Charlie, the spirit tempts Mike into trying to fight back, mocking him with his father's own words and actions in an attempt to anger Mike. And finally, the manifestation of the Good Boy was to try and guilt trip Mike, to make him feel even worse about what he did and that this was the punishment he deserved. Yet, despite the spirit's efforts, Mike never wavered. He kept pushing on. Sure, he was afraid, but he was determined to face his demons and get the curse lifted off of him to make off with his riches. While his intentions aren't too noble, I mean he was literally there to rob the place, I think that's what Eyes truly is about. It's about how we view things, because from time to time we let our own past hold us down by looking back at things we regret or wish we could have done better. And while we can't change anything about it, we can still learn from our past mistakes in order to move forward in life. Don't be afraid to try something new or to try something risky. As long as you're passionate about what you do, you'll know you made the right choice. Like how I got you, the viewer, to watch an entire video about the lore of a horror mobile game that wasn't supposed to be taken seriously in the first place. Thanks for watching. That's pretty much it for Eyes the Horror Game. I'm sorry it took a bit longer than expected as per usual, but it was a bit hard to make a script around it when the entire story is unfinished indefinitely. I know I probably got some things wrong again, but I think this is as concise as the story for Eyes is gonna get. Also, there might be some of you thinking about the dialogue of the Krasue saying that she was getting hit by someone, which led to people theorizing that she's the oldest daughter of Mr. Miles, but I don't think that's true. If Mr. Miles was an abuser, Emily wouldn't have written about him in that light. Additionally, he wouldn't have gone through the effort of building a magically sealed room for their protection. As I said earlier, Mike and Miles' story are completely different. The visions of monsters Mike sees are exclusive to him and his past, so most likely the Krasue was someone Mike knew that was an abusive household that involved it getting burned down, since she also references burning in her dialogues. But the Miles mansion is still standing, so it couldn't have taken place there. Then again, I could be wrong. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comments, and also let me know if you have any other underrated mobile horror games you'd like to share. You might be able to remind someone of their favorite game from the past, and I could have a potential video idea to work on in the future, so it's a win-win. Lastly, if you haven't seen it already, please consider becoming a channel member. I still want to make YouTube my full-time job, so I appreciate any support I get. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hopefully the next video won't take another month again. So for now, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.